Did you know you can win a man's heart simply by touching his pride? But do you really know what that means? Today I'm going to reveal a dark secret about how the male ego works. A secret many men fear and few women truly understand. If you master this, he'll love you like never before. But there's a price you must be willing to pay. Are you ready to hear the truth? Many people think men only feel loved when you give them what they want. But what they truly long for is something much deeper. Love, respect, even loyalty can be earned through an unexpected path. And it all starts with one simple principle: touching his pride. What I'm about to show you will completely change the way you see relationships. And trust me, it'll change your life too. Carl Jung, one of the most influential psychologists in history, understood that the male ego is a minefield, but also a man's greatest weakness. A man's pride is like a crystal castle. It looks indestructible, but with the right approach, you can break through it. I'm not talking about humiliation or manipulation, but about understanding the psychology behind his pride. Want to know how to use this to your advantage? Most people get it wrong when they try to understand male emotions. Pride isn't just a barrier, it's an opportunity. If you can touch it strategically, you can make a man love you more deeply than you ever imagined. But what happens when that ego is threatened? How does a man really react when his pride is on the line? I assure you, it's far more complex than you think. What I'm sharing today isn't magic or cheap tricks. It's a strategy rooted in deep psychological principles, the same ones used in couples therapy, business, and interpersonal relationships. If you can understand this, you'll have the key to transform the way men relate to you. I'll guide you step by step, but only if you're willing to let go of everything you thought you knew about men. Are you ready to take that first step? The male ego is a fragile construct. At its core, it isn't full of empty pride. It's full of insecurities, fears, and hidden desires. Men constantly seek validation, not just for what they achieve, but for what they believe others think of them. Touching that pride doesn't mean destroying it, but understanding its fragility. And that's the first step to building a deeper, more authentic connection. Imagine you've touched that sensitive spot. How do you think he'll react? Many would assume he'd run away or get defensive. But in reality, something much more interesting happens. His pride may be hurt, but it's in that moment that he seeks you out the most, that he needs you the most. That's the moment where you get to decide. Will you help him heal or let him fall even deeper? Think about it. Would you dare to challenge his ego to get closer to his heart? A man's pride, although it seems unbreakable, is like a cardboard shield, one that strengthens with each compliment but crumbles with the smallest crack. Carl Jung saw this as a manifestation of the shadow, that hidden part of the psyche that fears being seen as weak or vulnerable. When you help a man face his pride, you're actually helping him confront his own vulnerability. The real challenge isn't to wound his pride. The real challenge is to use that moment of vulnerability to open the door to a genuine relationship. That's where the magic happens. When you can hold him at his weakest point, and instead of pulling away, offer him space to heal. That's what builds true love. Love that doesn't depend on appearances or superficiality, but on mutual acceptance. So how can you do this effectively? The key is subtlety. Don't make him feel like you're manipulating him. Make him feel like you truly understand him on a deep level. The way you approach him, how you respond, and the words you choose, they're all crucial. This isn't about playing mind games. It's about real emotional communication. With this understanding, you can shift the dynamic of any relationship. And the best part? He won't see it coming. This is the moment you have to decide. Will you keep playing by the old rules, or dare to explore a deeper approach? Men don't need your submission. They need your understanding. And when you can see beyond their pride, you'll gain access to a part of them that very few ever get to see. But to do that, you must first be willing to challenge your own ideas about love. The male ego isn't just a barrier. It's a reflection of his deepest fears. Many men live in constant fear of being seen as weak. Jung called this the shadow. The shadow, though often rejected, has the power to become a source of strength if handled properly. And this is where your ability to touch his ego can lead to one of the most powerful transformations in his life. What most people don't understand is that when a man shows vulnerability, he's actually giving you his greatest gift. It's an act of trust, even if it doesn't always seem that way. When you break through his pride and let him be vulnerable, you step into a space where real emotions begin to flow. There are no more masks, just the man he truly is. And that's when love can truly flourish. Because mutual respect in a relationship is never built from ego, but from vulnerability. If you do this right, not only will he love you, but he'll respect you more deeply. True respect doesn't come from blind admiration, but from authentic acceptance of the other's imperfections. This is where ego loses its power and the connection becomes something far more meaningful. A man's desire is closely tied to his self-esteem, and his self-esteem, in large part, is built around his pride. When you touch that pride strategically, you're touching his deepest longing, to be seen, to be recognized. Men don't just want to be admired, they want to be understood. The kind of desire that awakens when you understand his ego in this way is a desire for love that transcends the physical. What few people realize is that the most powerful relationships are built with patience. It's not about hurting his pride on purpose, but about being able to recognize those moments where, subtly, you can help him see there's more to him than what he usually shows. That kind of patience lets you access a deeper connection, one that may seem out of reach to anyone unwilling to go beyond the surface. How do men react when they realize you no longer idealize them, no longer need them to validate yourself, but instead truly understand them? That's the power dynamic few dare to explore. Real intimacy begins when you stop seeking constant approval and instead focus on understanding and connecting. That's where fear is removed and real connection takes its place. What you've discovered so far is just the beginning. You're about to uncover an approach that will completely change how you understand love, respect, and power in relationships. The content you're finding here isn't common. It's a perspective few are privileged to know. And if you keep exploring this path, you'll come closer to a truth that very few people ever truly grasp. I assure you, what's to come could transform your life in irreversible ways. A relationship isn't defined by what we do for one another, but by what we're willing to accept and understand. When you learn how to touch a man's pride in the right way, you don't just shift the dynamic between you. You become the person he wants to be for you. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process of understanding, patience, and above all, empathy. Every man is different, but all have a weak spot, a place where their pride can be touched gently. And by doing so, you can help him become a better version of himself. It's not about playing games with his ego. It's about seeing the person he really is. And in the end, that knowledge leads to a stronger, deeper, and longer-lasting relationship. Are you ready to begin that journey? Men aren't always aware they're dancing with their own ego. Every interaction, every word is a chance to challenge that ego or reinforce it. When you learn how to touch it the right way, you create a kind of dance where both of you participate. But don't be mistaken. This isn't a superficial dance. It has the power to transform how he sees himself and how he sees you. Sometimes it's not the words that change the course of a relationship, but the subtle gestures, almost imperceptible ones. A simple change in the way you look at him, the way you carry yourself, can challenge a man's entire sense of pride. This is where true influence reveals itself. Not in confrontation, but in subtlety, in your ability to help him see his own reflection without him even realizing it. Words are more powerful than you think. They can build, but they can also destroy. And a man's ego is incredibly sensitive to the words he chooses to hear. When you use the right words at the right moment, you can help a man see his own vulnerability, and in that very moment, change the direction of his life. That's the power of well-chosen words, the power of authentic influence. What you need to understand is this: a man's pride isn't negative in and of itself. In fact, it can be a powerful engine for personal growth. The problem lies in how it's handled. If you understand his pride, you can help him evolve, help him see beyond his self-image and reach real connection. That's the goal, not to destroy it, but to expand his view of the world and of himself. Real connection doesn't happen when everything is perfect. It happens when both people can show their vulnerabilities and still feel safe. This kind of love isn't based on perfection, it's built on acceptance. On accepting that both of you have fears, flaws, and still you choose to build something stronger together. When a man lets you into that vulnerable space, it's because he trusts you in a deep and genuine way. At its core, ego is a defense mechanism, a way of protecting himself from emotional wounds, past rejections, and failures. When you touch that ego, you're not attacking him. You're inviting him to grow, to step out of his comfort zone. And that's when, paradoxically, the ego becomes a point of connection rather than an obstacle. Before you can understand someone else's ego, you must understand your own. Self-knowledge is the key to any meaningful relationship. Only when you can face your own fears, your own pride, can you truly grasp what someone else is going through. That journey of self-discovery is what prepares you to touch someone else's ego in a way that transforms them. Shifting your perspective on pride is the first step to transforming the relationship. When you stop seeing ego as the enemy and begin seeing it as an opportunity, everything changes. That's when you can truly reach a man's heart, not by fearing his pride, but by using it as a way to get closer to him. It's a mindset shift that changes everything. The courage to challenge a man's ego isn't an act of aggression, it's an act of compassion. When you touch his pride in the right way, you give him the chance to grow, to see beyond his facade. And that brave act not only transforms the relationship dynamic, it invites him into a level of self-awareness that few ever reach. And this is where the real magic of a relationship begins. The key to touching a man's pride effectively lies in balance. It's not about hurting him, it's about gently challenging him, showing him his own insecurities without making him feel attacked. That kind of balance can be hard to strike, but once you do, you create a dynamic where both of you grow together, where respect and love are built on solid ground. What you're learning today is just the tip of the iceberg. The next step is only for those willing to go deeper, for those who are truly seeking transformation. Not everyone is ready for that, and that's what makes it so valuable. This is where many begin to wake up, and where others simply walk away. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you knows that this message has the power to change everything. And the best is still to come. Because once you understand how to interact with the male ego, the rules of the game change completely. It's no longer about what he wants or what you need. It's about what both of you can create together. This kind of dynamic is where the strongest relationships are forged and where real love begins to bloom. There's no more space for fear or insecurity, only for authentic connection. Transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a continuous process of self-exploration, of understanding what each of you needs and what you're both willing to give. Every interaction, every moment is an opportunity to deepen that bond. It's not a destination. It's an ongoing journey that grows stronger with every step you take together. When you reach this level of understanding and connection, love is no longer taken for granted. It becomes something much deeper, something that transforms both of you. This is the kind of love that transcends ego, that rises above expectations and limitations. Authentic love is built on the foundation of vulnerability, respect, and mutual acceptance. Now that you've come this far, you understand that the real challenge isn't about how to hurt a man's pride, but how to touch it in a way that turns it into your ally. It's a complex process, but the most valuable part of it is that in learning how to navigate his ego, you also learn so much more about yourself and about love. This journey is far from over. In fact, it's only just begun. You don't need anyone's permission to be unforgettable. Have you noticed that the more you try to prove your worth, the more it seems like he's looking the other way? That's because energy isn't begged for, it's felt. And what we're about to spark isn't a trick, it's a transformation. Before we go on, click the like button and subscribe. Not out of vanity, but because what you're hearing here doesn't come from a book. It comes from experience. It's for those who are tired of asking, "Am I enough?" You're tired of trying to fit into molds that were never made for you. This message is for women who don't just want to be chosen. They want to be remembered. Because when you stop trying to earn your place and start occupying the space that's already yours, you stop chasing anything. You attract. You become the moment. You become home. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Presence, fire, gravity. Today, we're not going to talk about how to please a man. We're going to talk about how to make sure he never forgets you. Stay with me. What's coming next will change everything. Have you ever noticed that kind of silence that doesn't bother you, but asks to be felt? That moment when someone walks in from work, drops their keys on the table, passes by you, says a tired, "Hey," and then just falls quiet? The instinct for many is to ask, "What's wrong? Are you okay? Why are you acting strange today?" But the woman who can hear the silence, she doesn't run from it. She senses it. And it's exactly in that wordless space that she touches something no one else can see. Men don't always say what they feel. In fact, many don't even know how. From a young age, they're taught that feeling too much is weakness, and showing it is dangerous. So they build layers, masks, strategies. But even the thickest armor has a frequency, and the women who are truly present learn to listen beyond sound. His silence isn't emptiness. It's a subtle request for connection, a quiet attempt to rest from the constant demand of looking invincible. And yet almost no one notices. Almost no one pauses. Almost no one feels. Almost no one listens. Maybe he won't tell you he had a bad day, that he's frustrated, scared, or tired of trying to look like he has it all under control. Maybe he just sits next to you, says nothing, turns on the TV. But there's a code in that. He's saying, "Stay with me." He's asking without words, "Do you still see me even when I'm not trying to impress you?" And the woman who hears the silence, she answers with her presence. She doesn't need a manual or an explanation. She crosses her legs, leans her shoulder gently against his, breathes slowly, calmly, and he feels it. It's not the touch, it's the energy, the calmness, the absence of demands, the lack of judgment. She understands that silence isn't rejection, it's exhaustion, that not speaking doesn't mean not feeling. And in that space, where others would demand an emotional performance, she offers quiet presence, but presence in full. In Jungian psychology, there's a concept called the inferior function, the part of us that's been repressed, forgotten, or never fully developed. For many men, that function is emotional expression. When a woman can access that space without invading, without pushing, without trying to control, she becomes something rare, a bridge between what he lives and what he can't say. She doesn't need to interpret everything. You need to be there, truly there, attentive, with clean energy, present without expecting anything in return. Because even in silence, a man feels. He feels when someone is with him completely. No masks, no demands. As if saying, "I see your shadow, and I'm not afraid of it." And that simple presence can be more intimate than any kiss, because it's at that level he lets go. When he realizes she isn't there to change him into something else, but to allow him to be who he is, even in silence. There's a kind of gaze that doesn't demand a response. It simply receives. It says, "I'm here, even if you don't know how to say what you feel." That look disarms him. It opens inner doors he didn't even know he had locked. Because with her, he realizes he doesn't always have to be the strong one. Most people only know how to listen to what's said out loud. The unforgettable woman feels what isn't said and doesn't react with anxiety but with presence. Because she's not trying to fix anything. She's simply there, fully. That touches a man in a way no rehearsed phrase ever could. It's not a scripted "I love you." It's a silent, "I'm here." It's that moment when he glances sideways and thinks, "She understood me, even though I never asked." And that's unforgettable. He might forget dates, gifts, words, but he won't forget who was his refuge when he didn't know how to ask for one. She becomes the place, the moment, the kind of silence that holds, the kind of presence that heals. If you've ever lived that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That kind of connection doesn't depend on words. It happens in a glance, a shared breath, in the pause between gestures. Because sometimes all he needs is space, air, someone who doesn't pressure him, but still chooses to stay. That's where things deepen. Because when a man feels he can be vulnerable near a woman without losing her respect, he doesn't just connect, he roots himself. The woman who listens to silence isn't passive. She's sensitive. She chooses to act with intention, not out of desperation. She knows she doesn't have to pull him out of the shadows, just welcome him when he's ready to step out. And that choice, it changes everything. Have you ever wondered why some men pull away after hearing, "I love you"? Maybe it's because when words aren't backed by true energy, they lose their weight. But when he feels that you see him, even in silence, without trying to reshape or measure him, that means more than 1,000 declarations. Because real love doesn't shout, it recognizes. If you've ever felt this, right? I hear the silence. Because this kind of connection isn't invented. It happens. And when it happens, it leaves marks. It stays. It grows. It becomes the foundation for everything that comes after. Because I don't need him to say everything. I feel what he doesn't say. Have you noticed how some moments stay with us without any logical explanation? Like when a scent hits you out of nowhere, and suddenly you're right back in a place where you felt fully alive. Or when someone's small gesture echoes in your mind for days, long after the conversation is over. That's the energy of a woman who knows what she carries inside her. You can walk out of a room, and he'll still feel you. You can be gone all day, but your presence stays with him, like a memory that touches him without needing words. This has nothing to do with beauty, effort, or performance. It has everything to do with essence. Men don't remember what was just visual. They remember what was real. They remember how you made them feel. And when your presence is whole, when you give yourself to the moment fully, without rushing, without pressure, you don't just pass through him, you move through him. There are women who are looked at, and there are women who are felt. Which one do you want to be? Because when you are felt, it doesn't matter how many messages he gets, how many faces he sees, how many distractions life throws at him. He'll remember. He'll remember your laughter breaking the silence. He'll remember how your eyes slowed time when his mind was racing. He'll remember how you somehow knew exactly when not to say anything. And in that, everything was said. That kind of energy doesn't shout. It lingers. It's the imprint his body holds on to, even when his mind tries to forget. That's why sometimes he catches himself thinking of you for no reason. Not because you were the most beautiful, but because you were the most present. You were there, while the world rushed by, and that pause you brought became an emotional refuge for him. Carl Jung once said, "The unconscious is timeless," and it's exactly that space you access when your energy is genuine. You become an emotional symbol, an archetype, something he seeks even without realizing it. Time doesn't matter. Distance doesn't matter. The energy of a woman who leaves a mark on a man's emotions becomes a point of return within him. And when life breaks him down, he'll come back to that point, even if only in thought, even if only in a dream. It's like that song that suddenly plays and your eyes well up with tears, even when you can't explain why. You are that song. You don't need to be loud. You need to be real. Because what's true stays. What's true doesn't need a stage. It needs presence. When you enter a man's life with that kind of energy, he might not know how to explain it, but he will know how to feel it. And that's when you become unforgettable. Because while others are trying to get his attention, you captured his soul. While others are trying to be desired, you are remembered. On an ordinary Wednesday, in traffic, in the middle of a random thought, because your impact was made at the deepest level there is, the emotional. Want to know what he feels more than hearing "I love you"? He feels it when, even far away, your memory still calms his heart. He feels it when the memory of your touch still relaxes his shoulders, when your laughter still brings relief on a hard day, when the way you once looked at him still gives him answers, without a single word. You don't need to try hard to be that woman. because she isn't built with tricks or games. She appears when you stop trying to prove something. When you begin to simply be whole, be present, be yourself, unafraid to overflow. There's no formula to this, only surrender, intention, and truth. And if right now you remembered someone who once felt you in that way, or if you want to become the kind of presence that leaves a lasting mark, write in the comments, I am the energy that remains, because it's not about being remembered in his mind. It's about never being erased from his heart. And if this speaks to you in any way, if these words echo inside you like something you've always known but never said aloud, subscribe. Not for the algorithm, but because here we speak from soul to soul. And that's rare. That's necessary. That's what lasts. Now take a deep breath, because what comes next won't just touch him, it will touch you too. The place where the woman who feels deeply, who loves fully, who lives, finally meets what she deserves. Reciprocity. Imagine an ordinary heavy day. No catastrophe, just that weight on his shoulders, that feeling that the world asks too much and gives too little. He gets home, closes the door with a sigh so subtle almost no one would notice. You feel the way he places the keys down, the silence as he takes off his shoes, the distant stare for 3 seconds before his eyes find yours. It's not drama, it's contained exhaustion. You don't ask what's wrong. You don't demand answers. You simply approach and touch his arm, gently but fully. It's a touch without expectations, without needing a response. It's just presence. And in that moment, something he can't quite name begins to soften. Because men, even the strongest ones, wear armor. But not all armor needs to be broken by force. Some of it dissolves with tenderness. Your touch doesn't scream, notice me. It whispers, can you lower your guard with me? And he feels that. It's not just the touch, it's the energy behind it. Your hand isn't asking for attention. It's offering rest. And to him, that's worth more than 1,000 declarations of love said in passing. Because the truth no one says out loud is this. Men also need a place where their bodies aren't just desired, but allowed to rest, where touch isn't a cue for performance, but a reminder that they're enough, just as they are. Carl Jung spoke of how the body is an extension of the psyche, how every gesture, every physical reaction carries deep symbolic meaning. You may not realize it, but when you touch him with calmness, you activate more than skin. You touch a part of him that doesn't have the words but recognizes safety when it's present. His nervous system reads your gesture as nurture. His heart slows down, his shoulders, tense from traffic, from his boss, or from his own inner silence, finally relax. Not because you rescued him, but because you allowed him. And that, woman, is rare. So rare that he won't be able to explain it. He'll only be able to remember. Because the touch that disarms his defenses, it doesn't get posted on Instagram. It's not filmed for TikTok. It becomes memory, a physical memory. He'll remember how your fingers lightly brushed his forearm with no agenda, no ask. He'll remember the temperature of that moment, not the room's, but yours. And it doesn't have to be grand. It might be on the couch. It might be in the kitchen while he's talking about something seemingly unimportant. It might be while he's on the phone and you simply lean your head against his shoulder, and that's when the magic happens. He feels like he doesn't need to perform or be invincible. He just needs to exist with you. And you may ask, but what if he doesn't notice? The answer is, he does, even if he doesn't say it, even if he acts like nothing happened. His body knows, his heart registers. Because a touch that comes from a sincere place is never lost. It breaks defenses, it stays. And here's the truth. The world expects men to always be strong, to always be in control, always solving, always proving. But your touch, the one that doesn't demand, doesn't shout, doesn't invade, says something radical. Here, you can simply be. It's not the touch that calls him to bed. It's the touch that says, even when you're not at your best, you are still welcome here. And that kind of presence, that way of touching, transforms relationships. Because the woman who touches with her soul, without rush, without agenda, without performance, becomes a place of healing. She doesn't need to constantly say, I love you. She makes him feel loved, even in silence. And that is power. Not in constant intensity, but in consistent presence. Your hand says, I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to remind you that you can breathe. And that is what makes you unforgettable. If you've ever seen a man soften from just your touch, write in the comments, he felt it. Because the truth is, when you touch with emotional intention, not to gain attention, but to offer presence, he doesn't forget. He may never say it out loud, but his body will know. His soul will remember. You don't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes the softest touch says the most. And if this message touched you, it's because you've already been that touch for someone, or you're ready to become it. So if this video is putting into words what you've always felt, but the world rarely explains, subscribe. Because here we talk about that. Not idealized love, but love that breathes, that feels, that truly touches. Your touch is more than a gesture. It's a message, a memory, a form of healing. You're not here to ask for a place. You are the place. Have you ever wondered why some men pull away when they're loved, even when everything seems fine? It's like something invisible is pulling them away, and you're left wondering what went wrong. But what was missing wasn't love. It was space, freedom, a kind of air few know how to give, and even fewer know how to receive. Men don't feel loved only when they're close. They feel loved when they're allowed to leave without guilt. When they can breathe on their own and still feel your presence without pressure. And that's not about coldness or detachment. It's about something much deeper, emotional trust. Maybe you think that to keep a man close, you have to always be there, always showing interest, always reminding him how much he matters. But the truth is, the most powerful presence is the one that doesn't demand attention to exist. It's the woman who knows that love also lives in the spaces in between, in the pauses, in the moments when he chooses to be alone. And she doesn't fall apart because of that. He might drive aimlessly, hang out with friends, or lose himself in some mindless distraction on his phone. While the world would expect her to react with passive-aggressive tension, wrapped in sweet phrases or hidden expectations, behind a, "You didn't even reply," she simply breathes. She doesn't compete with his freedom. She understands it as part of the structure of real connection, because she knows the man who can leave without guilt returns with more desire, more devotion, and more truth. Mature love isn't measured by hours spent together. It's measured by the depth of the connection, even when your bodies are heading in different directions. And that takes strength. The woman who allows that space when without anxiety and is not weak, she is solid. She doesn't fear loss because she's not trying to control. She has become the safe place, the point of return, the breath he seeks after facing the world. And here's something few understand, but it changes everything. Men don't fall in love with what they feel under pressure. They fall in love with what they feel when they are free. It's in that absence that her impact is reflected. When he's lost in his own world and still, something inside him pulls him back. Not out of obligation, but out of desire. That's where the bond strengthens. When the memory of her becomes peace, not silent pressure. Carl Jung said that love, ultimately, is allowing the other to be, without trying to mold them. And that applies to space too. When she doesn't try to fill every gap with her presence, when she doesn't try to occupy every thought, every decision, she teaches him that love can coexist with autonomy. That being together isn't about being attached. It's about being connected, even when apart. This woman doesn't need proof. She doesn't send 3 messages in a row out of insecurity. She doesn't constantly ask, "Where are you?" Or, "Why didn't you respond?" Or, "What are you thinking?" Because she already knows. If you have to beg for attention, it's not love you want, it's validation. And she's not in that place anymore. She's grown, emotionally evolved, and that evolution is felt, not forced. She's chosen to trust, not blindly in him, but deeply in herself. She trusts that if he leaves, it's not loss, It's redirection. She trusts that if he needs his own world for a while, it doesn't diminish the value of what they share. And that kind of trust, that silent surrender, isn't learned through tips and advice. It's built through living, through facing her own fears and saying, I won't shrink myself because of my insecurity. She understands it's not absence that kills love. It's the unresolved anxiety projected onto that absence. It's the desperate attempt to fill every gap with certainty. But real love isn't built on forced certainties. It's built on emotional presence, even when physical presence is missing. And the most beautiful part, when she stops fighting the space she begins to notice, he comes back. And not out of comfort, but because with her, he can be. He can breathe. He can lower his guard. He can make mistakes without being crucified and succeed without being put on a pedestal. He can exist as a man, not just as a partner, but as a whole human being. And when a man feels he can be whole with a woman, he doesn't leave her. He chooses her again and again. She's not the place where he's punished. She's the place where he's seen. She's the woman who understands that absence is not a threat, that silence is not rejection, that giving space is not giving up. She sets herself free, and that's what makes her unforgettable. Because he no longer needs to run to find peace. He just needs to close his eyes and remember her. This part doesn't need calls to action, no invitations to like, comment, or subscribe, because this chapter is about space, and when space is true, it speaks for itself. Here, silence is intentional. Here, the pause is part of the music, and the woman who understands that doesn't lose the man. She inspires permanence. She transforms what could have been absence into longing. And longing, that ache of presence and distance, is what keeps someone's heart beating for you, even far away. This woman doesn't beg for love. She attracts it with the lightness of someone who has already found herself. She doesn't suffocate. She allows. And in allowing, she becomes the only one he misses. Even without words, there is something that can transform everything. And it has nothing to do with what you wear, what you say, or how much you give. It has to do with how you see, not with your eyes, but with your presence, with the silent truth of someone who sees beyond his behaviors, someone who recognizes even what he tries to hide from himself. Because deep down, every man longs for something he cannot ask for out loud, to be seen entirely. Not for his achievements, not for his body, not for the role he plays, but for what he is, for what he cannot name, but still feels pulsing inside. And when a woman carries that gaze, that kind of presence that doesn't try to fix, but embraces, he feels something he may have never felt clearly before, permission to be, not the ideal man, not the man the world expects, but the real man, with flaws, with shadows, with vulnerability. And that touches something deeply masculine that lies dormant in many men, the freedom to show himself without fear. He won't tell you this. He'll keep taking out the trash, fixing what's broken, half listening as you finish your tasks. But when he feels that look from you, the one that watches without judgment, that doesn't label or try to change, something awakens in him, because most men were taught they must achieve to be worthy, must be useful to be loved. And what you do in that moment is silently destroy that lie. Jungian psychology teaches that every person carries a hidden part of themselves, the shadow shaped by the demands of the world. And that shadow includes everything he doesn't show: his sensitivity, his insecurity, his fears, his flaws. When you look at him and see that too, without fear, without disgust, without trying to fix, it's as if you're saying, I see you even when you're not shining. And that heals. You know those moments when he seems more distant? When you can feel he's physically there, but emotionally far away? Sometimes it's not disinterest, it's self-protection. They're the parts of him that feel they can't be exposed without cost, without shame, without losing something. But when you notice him in the small things, when you genuinely say, I love how you pay attention to the details, he hears something far greater than the words. He hears, I see you, even when the world passes you by. That's not a compliment, much less flattery. It's recognition. It's active perception. It's when he realizes he doesn't need to put on a performance to be appreciated. He only needs to exist. And in that space, the relationship stops being a negotiation and becomes an encounter. Men don't say everything they feel, and most don't know how to express just how much they're transformed by a look of genuine recognition. But they feel it. They absorb it. They hold on to every detail from the woman who didn't try to polish them, but had the courage to love them as they were. Not because they didn't need to grow, but because she knew that recognition is what creates the safe space for growth. This kind of woman is rare because she doesn't compete with his ego. She nurtures his essence. She doesn't make him feel tested. She makes him feel whole. And the more whole a man feels with a woman, the more he wants to stay. Not out of fear of losing her, but out of gratitude for having found her. In his life, he may have had many women, some beautiful, some intense, some even unforgettable. But the one who stays imprinted in his memory, the one who resonates in his soul, is the one who saw beneath the surface, the one who saw beauty even in the parts he never dared show, the one who, instead of falling in love with who he could become, chose to love who he already was. Even with the cracks, even with the gaps, even with the silences. This kind of love isn't bought, it's not forced, it's not rehearsed, it's conscious presence, it's mutual vulnerability, it's emotional maturity. And that is exactly what takes root in a man's heart. Not the perfect woman, but the real one. The one who touches with words, but also with gestures. Who looks at him with admiration, but without demanding a performance. Who admits her own mistakes because she knows that growth only happens where there's room to be imperfect. Her gaze doesn't demand attention. It radiates calm. It says, here, you can exist without a mask. And when he feels that, he doesn't just respect her, he values her. He sees her as safe territory. And for a man, there is no greater proof of love than that feeling. Deep down, he doesn't need to understand everything about himself. He just needs to know you won't run when his messiest parts come to the surface. Because when you stay, when you see even the parts he's not proud of, you become a living memory, even when your physical presence is far away. You become the place he returns to, the inner echo, the constant ache of longing. So today, I invite you to remember your power to see. Look with the eyes of your soul. Look gently without rushing to fix. Be there, fully with the emotional solidity of someone who silently says, I see you even when you try to hide. That is the woman a man carries, in his memory and in his heart. And if this message spoke to that part of you that loves deeply, but often in silence, subscribe. Because here the intense and real women gather. Here emotional truth has a voice, and so do you. But above all, don't leave just yet. There's so much more waiting for you. Dive into the other videos here on the channel and keep expanding your energy and your power. I'll see you in the next video.